Cool. Hello everybody, how you doing today? Good? That's great. You don't know who I am. This is my first time existing on the internet to any large degree. I need to ramble, and you're gonna not ramble with me, you're gonna listen to me, because that's your choice, and I appreciate that choice. You're very much respected and cherished here. Thank you so much for watching these, what was it, minute I was setting that up for? Still much appreciated. So I don't know if you could tell from me literally just setting this up right now, I guess you could call me like a pretty big fan of Spider-Man. But in all seriousness, Spider-Man has always been my favorite superhero, both Marvel and just overall. He makes up about 1/5 of my entire personality, and I'm going to prove it to you right now. My immediate thought was just to turn on the camera and then just start talking. But then I realized I don't want to do that. So instead, I am going to follow an itinerary that I didn't make myself, but somebody else did for me. Oh, that's warm. Okay. Reddit user Invincible Elliot created this nifty iceberg chart about Spider-Man. Now, if you're unfamiliar with iceberg charts or iceberg videos, basically this chart basically how it works is the iceberg is broken down into multiple tiers, starting at the top either being the tip of the iceberg or, especially in this case, the sky above the iceberg. Now the sky above the iceberg, that's all the normie info. That's the thing that everybody knows. That as you get deeper and deeper down into the Mariana Trench of the subject, you start to learn things that either nobody knows or most people would prefer not to know. But yeah, so basically this chart is meant to act as a representation of what is the most commonly known things down all the way to what is the little secrets hidden within the fandom or within the history of a character or subject. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to explore this. And where better to start our descent into the deep abyss of the ocean than from the sky above it. I have categorized this on my own behalf. Basically, I was going to break down, at least for this tier, it's going to be broken down into categories, so like movies, comics, TV shows, but then I'm going to introduce both the categories and the more specific topics mentioned in the iceberg by what I believe is the most commonly known information first, and then working my way down. I don't have any empirical evidence to back this up. I have not resourced any polling data. I have not asked around of what is more common or what is not. This is completely subjective. But I am the only Spider-Man fan, so I'm right. It's my channel, and my word is law. But you're still here, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching. And to prove that I'm being impartial in my subjectivity, we're going to have to talk about Morbius first, because of course. Sorry to interrupt myself, but I actually wanted to do something before we actually got into the iceberg, which is practice. I obviously do not have a sponsor, because this is the first video I've ever made. My audience is a camera, so I don't have an ad to read, but I do want to get in the practice of doing it at the beginning. If that makes sense. I want to practice being a YouTuber. I know, crazy. But again, I don't have a sponsor to practice with, at least not yet. Any ethical company, please? So instead, I'm going to start with a shout out. And who am I going to shout out? Oh, I know. The first official shout out on this channel will be Wendigo. He absolutely does not need my shout out. He's at more than 1 million subscribers. I'm actually going to check. I'm one of these subscribers. 2.3 million. Good for him. He deserves it. But yeah, Wendigoon, he is such a wholesome man who has made a career off of examining the very cursed content that he enjoys. He's got a voice you can listen to for hours, and the knowledge and dedication to his craft that makes it all the more pleasant to listen to. If you're gonna start anywhere, I'd actually recommend his Black Parade video. It's not one of his best known, or at least it's not the most popular one on his channel. However, it is one of my favorites, and it is an outlier in his content because he doesn't really talk a lot about doesn't talk a lot about music. His content is more based around narratives or stories, fictional or otherwise, but the Black Parade is art, and so are stories, so of course he covered it. Just go watch it. You don't need to hear me. I'm already doing one ramble. Wendigoon doesn't need the other one. And yeah. But on a note of sincerity, Wendigoon is the person who inspired me to just get the camera and start rolling and just start talking about things I like. Because for the longest time I've been working on the assumption that my content has to be like high intensity work, it has to be art, it has to be so spectacular, when I could just talk to a camera and talking to a mic for a prop because I have anxiety. Even though I absolutely have a lav mic that works and is working right now, I did not test it before. That was probably a bad idea. It's fine. So yeah, Wendigoon is one of my personal favorite content creators, and he's the one who sort of showed me that you can just talk to a camera and you could just post that because you want to. So thank you, Wendigoon, for showing me that content is content and you can make whatever you want. And also, thank you because this is a perfect opportunity to tag you in the tags. So it's a mutual helping each other out. Okay? So thank you very much, sir. Watch this video, but then go watch his videos, starting with Black Parade because it's one of my favorite videos, and I'm probably incorporating a part of his personality into mine, but hopefully that'll wear off soon as I get more comfortable. So yeah, thanks Wendigoon. Thank you all for dealing with me. I have to edit this into the start of the video, but like, still, just the fact you clicked, I appreciate it. And stick around, and hopefully I'll have earned your viewership. Morbius in the MCU refers, by the way, we're starting with the movies category. Morbius in the MCU refers to the present but improbable possibility that Morbius could make an appearance in the MCU. Basically, how it would work is the fact that apparently at the end credit scene of Morbius, oh, spoilers, by the way, if you care, probably don't, but hey, spoiler warning. At the end credit scene for the Morbius movie, it's revealed that Adrian Toomes has been transported. He's in the Sonyverse now, which is where Andrew Garfield and Eddie Brock, played by Tom Hardy, and Morbius, played by Jared Leto, that's where they all hang out, and MCU Vulture is there now as well. Which is confusing, right? But it's multiverse magic stuff, so nothing ever makes sense. I don't know why I'm, like, gravitating here. I'm neglecting this side of the camera. Screen test. Should have done this before. Okay. But yeah, with that, along with the fact that because all Marvel content is either confirmed or assumed to be in the same all-encompassing multiverse, yeah, it means Morbius does technically exist. Is he gonna show up? Probably not, because Marvel actually understands their audience's humor. So yeah, it is technically possible, but I'm gonna say it's a safe bet to say that's not gonna happen anytime soon. Maybe Phase 50, when Jared Leto's dead and they have to digitally recreate him and then lose money because of it. Okay, now that we're done with Morbius, we can talk about another good Spider-Man movie. Why did I say another good Spider-Man movie? Spider-Man 4 was supposed to be the fourth installment of the Sam Raimi series of Spider-Man movies. I say supposed to be because it never got completed. It's actually an interesting outlier in the history of canceled or discontinued projects for Spider-Man, because it's one of the only ones that was canceled that was canceled by the creative force behind it, specifically Sam Raimi, and specifically because people bullied him about Spider-Man 3. That's an exaggeration, but it's kind of close. Basically, he was kind of disheartened because of the mixed reception of Spider-Man 3, and as he was in the middle of producing, or in production of Spider-Man 4, he quickly realized that it was not up to his standards, and that he personally did not want to create a Spider-Man movie that wasn't great. So yeah, he just stopped because he wanted to. Much like I want to stop right now because I'm tired and have therapy in like 2 hours. Like, I'm so dramatic. It's fine. Sam, you're valid, but I'm not, so I'm gonna keep going. I'm having fun, I promise. Like, I know some of my friends are watching who are concerned for me. I'm okay. I'm having fun. It's just the anxiety. But speaking of Sam Raimi's Spider-Verse, there's also another interesting tidbit, which is Doctor Strange being confirmed as existing in Sam Raimi universe. Doctor Strange, while never making a physical appearance in any of the Spider-Man movies directed by Sam Raimi, he is confirmed to exist in their universe. Specifically in the scene in Spider-Man 2 where Jonah and I believe it's like a marketing person are trying to brainstorm a name for Otto Octavius after his equipment gaslights him into becoming a menace. So during their workshopping of a name, the marketing guy throws out like, "Hey, what about Doctor Strange?" And Jonah's like, "Hey, it's pretty darn good," but it's taken. Whether this means that there is Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme that we're familiar with in the MCU, or if it's a different version of Doctor Strange that isn't a wizard, that's undetermined. But it's still an interesting bit of like world building, or like it's nice to have that little reference to sort of like acknowledge as like, oh, it's like Spider-Man is a part of a bigger thing, even though thanks to Sony kind of has to be his own thing for right now. I'm not trying to start beef with Sony, I swear. And while that might be the last big topic about Sam Raimi, or at least like again a big one on this tier, it's not the last one technically, and it's also not going to be the last time we see him in the iceberg. Definitely not. But for now, we're going to move on and actually take a quick peek over at the MCU, specifically for the Civil War prototype suit. Now, I absolutely read far too deep into things, so when it said Civil War prototype suit, I was immediately confused, because the thumbnail for this tier is what in my research I discovered was the suit that was used on set for Spider-Man's appearance in Captain America Civil War, which, for those of you who don't know, is the first appearance of Spider-Man in the MCU, kind of a big deal, and it plays into other things, but we'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, it's most likely referencing the on-set suit, because it does look kind of, unpolished, but also it didn't need to be for what it was used for. Oh yeah, and for those who don't know a lot about like digital effects in Hollywood, you might be confused, especially if you've seen the movie, because all of like the fight scene at the airport that Peter is full suited up in as Spider-Man, it's all CG, so it might be confusing of like why they would even have a suit on set. And the reason why is because mainly for reference work. Like, sure, they might like crop out the actual footage and replace it with digital assets, but that live action footage is still important so that you get to see like what colors or what hues like the lighting on set creates, what the texture of the suit itself, like how that affects the lighting and the coloration and all that stuff, and how like it stretches and how that translates to how the light reflects off of the suit. So like it's still useful. It is pretty common practice to just have like practical assets mainly used as reference pieces. So yeah, that explains it. However, like I said, I took it a bit too far, and I actually figured out that not only was there this prototype suit, which is most likely what it was the iceberg was talking about, but also there was an early concept suit inspired by Ben Reilly's Spider-Man suit. Now, if you don't know who Ben Reilly is, he a clone. He is the most popular clone of Peter Parker, of Spider-Man, and he was the original Scarlet Spider, and that's pretty much all you need to know. Who knows, maybe I'll make a video about him. I probably will if I have the time. But we gotta finish this one first. But yeah, I just like the suit, and there's a bunch of reasons why I like the suit, but also I am trying not to go on more of a ramble than I need to, which is, to me, feels kind of oxymoronic, but we're gonna roll with it. And with that, we're going all the way to not the MCU. Instead, we're going to the Amazing Spider-Man universe, starting with Amazing Spider-Man 3. Amazing Spider-Man 3 was, of course, the intended, planned, but cancelled threequel? Sequel to the sequel of the third installment of the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy. So yeah, they had characters cast, they had a script, they had Mark Webb, who was the director of the other Amazing Spider-Man movies. By the way, the irony is not lost on me that Mark Webb directed a series of Spider-Man movies. Doesn't matter, but I think it's funny and I like it. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of detail that goes into why it was canceled, for what reasons, and what purposes. And while I could sift through all of that, I didn't. But what I do know for certain is that The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was initially planned. It was initially planned to come out in like 2018, sometime around there. But in 2016, Captain America Civil War came out and debuted Tom Holland's Spider-Man and the MCU's version of the character, which are the same thing, but you get what I mean. Now, as a fan, I would be more than comfortable juggling two like parallel franchises of the same character, like keeping track of that at the same time, because I love Spider-Man and I would suffer for him. I'd also flourish for him. Don't worry, I am going to therapy. But yeah, if you're looking at it from Sony's perspective, which I know, ew, but stay with me. Not only is Sony dealing with Disney a lot in this, but also they also have to pretty much front the bill for two different Spider-Men. While that may not exactly be it, because like, oh, Disney's kind of paying for it, or I don't know what the deal was about, it still would have been seen as like risky, both in a financial and like marketing standpoint, to not only have your version of Spider-Man keep going, but also have a new version of Spider-Man that is being produced by your competitor. Them kind of going on at the same time and eventually leading to butting heads. On camera, off camera, in the fandom, in universe, it was, to Sony, it was probably seen that some friction between the two fan bases would have inevitably come to pass. So they just decided to pass on The Amazing Spider-Man 3, which is sad, because I personally liked Andrew Garfield. By the way, I am not this kind of fan, but I very rarely get chances to say I told you so. And here's the thing, I have always liked Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I do not rank the 3 live-action Spider-Man, because that is frivolous. Toby did a good job, Andrew did a good job, Tom did a good job. They all did great portraying their interpretations and the director's interpretations of this popular character, and they stayed true to it, and they should be applauded for all their performances. Sorry. But I remember watching The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in theaters and liking it, only to go on the internet and have everybody tell me that they were terrible, that it was ridiculous, why is Jamie Foxx blue, and dragging the two movies absolutely through the mud. And I'm just sitting there quietly like, well, I thought it was pretty good. And then No Way Home comes around, and all of a sudden everybody loves Andrew again. He's back! We've missed you so much! And for my fellow silenced brothers and sisters and gender-ambiguous cousins, I see you. We can now celebrate. But I'm also suspicious about how many people were celebrating it. Like, it was absolutely not the majority of people back in, like, 2012, 2015, or whatever time frame the two movies. I know my Spider-Man stuff, I promise. It didn't feel like there were a lot of people who were sort of trying to keep it hush. They liked the movies. It very much felt like the entire internet hated Andrew for no reason. But he came back, He came back after being gone for so long, and we all love him. I'm not a gatekeeping fan. I do not encourage gatekeeping. I do not encourage fomenting discourse into the fandom, especially one that I love so much, and for such a wholesome, optimistic character. But I just never get a win like this, so I have to celebrate it. Like, I never get the thing of like, oh, I like this thing, and then everybody's like, no, you're wrong. And then later on, everybody's like, oh, we like this thing now. It's like, well, like, I'm happy you're here, but, and it's not a big deal, but, I was here first. Moving on. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was not the only Sonyverse movies relating to Spider-Man that also got canned because of the deal with Marvel. There was also supposed to be a 2-part film series about the Sinister Six, which, remembering off the top of my head, I believe the synopsis was something along the lines of Spider-Man, Sinister Six, 6 or possibly more popular villains team up and kill Spider-Man. I don't think he actually dies, but that's what their intentions are, and that's fairly certain what the plot was. But there is something rather interesting about the Sinister Six movie, and that is the casting. So of course we have a lot of recurring characters. Of course, Spider-Man and possibly Aunt May. She wasn't listed, but I assume that Aunt May is in everything related to Spider-Man. Well, I guess not for Tom Holland Spider-Man, but hey, that's a whole other conversation. Harry comes back. Kirk Connors comes back as a flashback. Same thing with Mary and Richard Parker. There was also a lot of interesting new-coming characters that would have been introduced in these movies, starting with technically a newcomer. I'll roll with it. Starting with a technical new arrival, J.K. Simmons as... I was about to say J.K. Rowling, I'm so sorry. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson himself. There we go. And yes, I know that Simmons had already played the character in Sam Raimi's universe, but because he wasn't introduced in the first 2 Amazing Spider-Man movies, nor the third one, for obvious reasons, he's still a newcomer. But along with him, there are a lot of other interesting names that still seem familiar, even though the project was cancelled. Specifically, Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock and Woody Harrelson as Cletus Cassidy, which, pretty darn cool. It also explains for those who are curious about why they got cast. It's because they were there before. They got there first. Also, at the time of recording this, the upcoming Kraven the Hunter movie hasn't come out yet. I don't think it's going to come out for a while. But Aaron Taylor Johnson is scheduled, or cast, I should say, to play Kraven the Hunter, which is really cool because he was also meant to He was also cast and was meant to play him all the way back for the Sinister Six movies. We'd also have some other interesting casting choices for other new characters, such as Christoph Waltz for Dr. Otto Octavius, Zachary Quinto for Mysterio. I'm not super familiar with Zachary Quinto's work, but he visually he fits. He looks like he played it well. I already said we had Andrew Garfield, we had Felicity Jones. There were some other cool ones. They're all cool. This is all cool. I love this. I love Spider-Man, I promise. Oh yeah, Gary Oldman is Miles Warren. If you don't know who Miles Warren is, you don't need to. He's another villain, lesser known. But Gary Oldman in a Spider-Man movie? I know nothing about the actors personally, or I don't have any personal opinions about any of them, besides Jared Leto, but we're not talking about him here. Just visually and based off of the work I'm familiar with, just visually and based off of the work I've seen of these actors, pretty interesting character choices. Oh yeah, and I'd be remiss if I did not mention that John Cena was cast to play Flint Marko, aka the Sandman. Listen, I was not a big WWE fan. I played the games, but I did not keep up with the lore behind it. But I have seen John Cena act, and I would like to see him play Sandman. I'm sure he can play serious characters, but also, like, it'd be interesting to watch. And with that, that concludes the movies portion of this tier of the iceberg. We're gonna talk about the shows. We're gonna start off with Spider-Man Unlimited, which is the like loose sequel to the, I believe it was the 1990s animated series. Basically, Peter has to go up into space to save John Jameson, who has, I believe it was called Battle World? I could absolutely be wrong on that, but he's in space. So Spider-Man has to go because like Venom and the Carnage symbiotes hitched a ride on the spaceship and they're off in space now. And for some reason, Spider-Man got blamed for that. So he goes up into space with his nanosuit, meets up with John, who doesn't want to go home because he's actually joined a rebellion against the dictator of this planet, and he wants to stop him. Spider-Man's like, I guess, like, if that's what I gotta do to help you come home willingly, then alright. Produced by Toei's company in Japan, Japanese Spider-Man refers to that company's series of almost the same name, wherein there is a live-action interpretation of Spider-Man. It's like a Monster of the Week action series where, yeah, Spider-Man fights monsters. But more specifically, it is categorized as a tokusatsu. And tokusatsu is a Japanese term that refers to a show or movie that is live action and implores the use of heavy use of practical effects, mainly explosives and like huge, like detailed monster costumes, stuff like that. If it sounds familiar, it's going to sound even more familiar in a second. And while the Toei Company's roster of tokusatsu is extensive, and you'll see what I mean in a second, Japanese Spider-Man is still notable in Toei's history and in the history of tokusatsu because it was the first show, I believe it was the first show, that implored the, I used that word twice now, I like it, implored the use of the plot progression of hero fighting monster. Monster gets big, hero too small to fight big monster, hero must then summon a giant robot to fight and defeat it's Power Rangers. That's what it says. Toei Company owns Power Rangers. It's Power Rangers. Tokusatsu. There you go. And while the name and the likeness of the character is very obviously inspired by Spider-Man, the similarities between the two characters pretty much end there. Like, this version of the Spider-Man, he gets powers from the suit instead of getting bit by a spider. His suit is containing, like, this, again, Power Rangers, but it's like a gauntlet that contains all of it. The suit and just all that stuff. He also has a flying car. Oh yeah, he also has a Zord. I believe it was like a leopard Zord? Giant leopard robot that turns into giant mech. And while it's popularly believed that the American, like the original version of Spider-Man, is like child-friendly or meant for younger audiences, Toei Company did not follow that either. There is at least one instance of this Spider-Man shooting a gun into a crowd of criminals? I'll call them criminals. And also, there is a thing where, like, this Spider-Man announces, like his, like, his nickname, like, his grand mythical title. But that title always changes depending on who he's fighting. So I believe it was in the first episode. The first like nickname or title he gave himself was Emissary of Hell. If you know a lot about Peter Parker, not very likely he'd call himself that. So yeah, needless to say, the two characters are pretty different from each other. So different, in fact, I just realized that there's like a sunspot here. Those are mushrooms. I don't know if you saw it before, but those are mushrooms. I like this sweater. But yeah, the characters differ so much, there actually is like an emphasis in the fandom to distinguish between the original version of Spider-Man and this version of Spider-Man. So, of course, the fandom gave him nicknames. Those nicknames being, of course, Japanese Spider-Man, as well as Toei Spider-Man, and also Supaida-Man, which like, I don't think it's meant to be offensive, but I also can't be sure of it either. Because, yeah, it's basically just the phonetic spelling of the word Spider-Man as spoken in a Japanese accent. This is for informational and educational reasons. I am not intending to mock or belittle the Japanese language or the Japanese people. And with that, we're going to skip back over to the East and actually talk about the Spectacular Spider-Man, specifically its cancellation. The cancellation of Spectacular Spider-Man, first of all, let me talk about Spectacular Spider-Man. Spectacular Spider-Man was one of many animated series about the character throughout the character's history, and is also seen as one of the best. In my research, I heard the creative heads of the show talk about how their intention with Spectacular Spider-Man was actually to try to make a show that perfectly combines the entire history of comics and shows and other story elements into one cohesive entity. And when you watch the show, it's pretty clear to see that they worked off of that premise. The show was very well received, and most people believe that it was cut too short, me being one of them. And also, just the treatment of the show was weird. Like, it was first, like the first season was broadcast on, like, WB Kids, which, like, stopped being a thing, like, halfway through the season. But then it was able to rebound after Disney XD started broadcasting it, and then also agreed to broadcast the second season. But then, just out of nowhere, they just stopped doing it. And the reason why the third season never got off the ground is actually because of what I mentioned before with Spider-Man 4, which is the unfortunate fate of a lot of Spider-Man projects. Also the same one that I forgot to call back to for The Amazing Spider-Man 3. The studio got in the way. Specifically, Disney got in the way this time. And yeah, Disney also got in the way with The Amazing Spider-Man, but this more so. Because while all the stuff with The Amazing Spider-Man happened due to Disney wanting to, like, borrow the live-action interpretation of, like, his really popular character, I believe Disney just flat out bought the rights to creating animated series of Spider-Man. Now, if you're not too familiar with the intricacies of copyright law, it might be confusing as to how Disney can buy out the rights specifically to the animated version of Spider-Man, while Sony could still retain the live-action version. It's confusing to me as well. But yes, not only did Marvel buy out those rights, but they did so specifically so that they could clear themselves to create their own Spider-Man series, which would end up being the Ultimate Spider-Man series. Which, I like the Ultimate Spider-Man series, but I don't think it's better than Spectacular Spider-Man. Also, I just personally feel kind of icky about talking or watching the Ultimate Spider-Man, because the voice actor was Drake Bell. If you know, you know. But yeah, but what's even more frustrating about the cancellation of Spectacular Spider-Man is, like, Disney never actually came down with the axe. They just kind of just stopped caring about it. Like, even the directors of the show say, like, the show was never canceled, it's just never being continued again. Which is just, I don't know why, but for me that seems pretty rude. Like, it's one thing to just say, like, hey, we want to make a new show, we want to start over from scratch, so we're scrapping this one. Even though everybody likes it, it's not ours, so we're making a new one. Like, that's pretty standard. It's crummy, but it's standard. However, just to be like, alright, cool, we're going to make our own thing about the thing you were doing really well, but we're going to do it on our own, and we'll catch you later. And then never catch up again. God, it's just all sorts of frustrating. Donald Glover has an interesting history with Spider-Man, because before he even stepped foot on the set of Spider-Man Homecoming as Uncle Aaron, he already had so much influence in the history, or he was still, like, a big deal to some extent. Basically, how the story goes is Amazing Spider-Man was looking for their Peter Parker, and Donald Glover really wanted to be Peter Parker. So while he was on Community, which was still running at the time that casting was being done for Amazing Spider-Man, Donald Glover, and I believe it was the second season premiere, he wore a Spider-Man costume. And while he unfortunately did not get the role of Peter Parker, he did inspire the right person. I believe it was a producer at Marvel who saw Donald Glover wear like a Spider-Man shirt or like a Spider-Man costume on Community and loved the idea so much, uh, or loved the idea of having a black Spider-Man that yada 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 Miles Morales. And furthermore, when the time came for somebody to voice Miles Morales when he appeared on the Ultimate Spider-Man series, guess who they called in to voice him? Oh, also, I'd be remiss if I did not mention in a conversation about Donald Glover that he is the voice of Marshall Lee, the Vampire King. Every time I remember that, it feels as shocking and impactful as the first time I learned about it. I don't know why. I don't know why it gets me so much. It's like remembering that Donald Glover is the voice of Marshall Lee and that it's literally just Donald Glover's voice. It's like every time I hear that, like I can, like it feels like I'm like I haven't heard my dad's voice in like 5 weeks and like we're talking on the phone for the first time in a while. It's just something about it. But yeah, Donald Glover's pretty cool. My dad's pretty cool too. God, I love my dad. And that does it for the shows. And we're almost done. But I know I told myself I was only gonna record for an hour. But also, the next one is really, really short. But I can justify this by saying that this is for Spider-Man. So we're going to talk about the games now. Specifically one game, because there is only one entry on this part of the iceberg, which is the puddles controversy. Now, I was just as confused as you are when I heard about some puddle-related controversy relating to Spider-Man. However, don't worry, it's pretty silly. So basically how the story goes is E3 announces Spider-Man for the PS4. And when they do this, they preview a scene at like a Fisk construction site, and apparently there was like hella puddles. And these puddles looked really cool. And I was like, oh my god, these puddles are like puddling so well. And then when the game came out, or like basically like in-game footage was released a little while afterwards, and the puddles looked different. So yeah, basically how the story goes is E3 at E3 Sony announces Spider-Man for the PS4, and they like use a scene or they show off footage from a scene where Spider-Man is fighting demons at the Fisk construction site, or one of the Fisk construction sites. And in this scene, if you look at the ground really closely, there are puddles. And it's like hella puddles. And they're like mad reflective. And like forget the variety of gadgets, forget the great writing and story progression, forget the dynamic combat system. No, these puddles is where it's at. I got a pre-order for the puddles. So whenever new footage came out of the same scene, people were shocked because the worst had happened. They looked at the ground and they saw that the puddles were different. And like, to put my hat in the ring of where I stand with this, it's not like there were flat textures. Like, they still looked like puddles. But apparently this caused like a huge uproar, and like people were shocked, and they were like accusing Santa Monica of like downgrading the graphics of the game. Why? I don't know, but it didn't stop them from saying it. And this was being talked about so much that a member of the Santa Monica team actually had to publicly state, no, we did not downgrade the puddles. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get through it, but like, it's puddles, dude. Like, I'd understand if like it seemed like the story was rushed, or like if there were a bunch of bugs that weren't fixed. Like, that's understandable. But you're complaining about puddles right now. Like, I cannot think of something that has less impact on the quality of the game and is as inconsequential to the plot of the game as the puddles. Video. We're not done with this tier of the iceberg yet, and we're certainly not done with the iceberg itself. So yeah, I'll absolutely make a video finishing up the last things we need to talk about for this tier of the iceberg, and then we'll start going down further into the list. There's not much left to talk about. I mean, there's like depending on how much information or how much detail I want to put into it. Um, but like, yeah, I'd say we've gotten through more than half, which I think is a pretty good place to start for a series, video series. But yeah, like next time on Dragon Ball Z, we're gonna talk about the comics, talk about some like miscellaneous, just like silly stuff, which is, kind of fun. Not kind of fun. It is fun. There's one very fun thing that I very much like. The other two are fine, but I do have a favorite on the silly list. And then we're actually gonna get out of the clouds and actually smack into the iceberg itself, which, hey, I'm excited for it. So yeah, feel free to keep an eye out for like the next video on this tier of the iceberg, as well as other iceberg videos that may come out. And with that, I just want to humbly say thank you for watching. I'm gonna say thank you a lot. Like, sorry and thank you are the things I say most often. But yes, I do want to emphasize, like, I absolutely appreciate it. Because again, you did not need to watch this whole video. Like, whether or not you're watching it, like, actively, like, looking at the screen, or if you have it playing in the background while you're, I don't know, annotating notes from last Friday's D&D session. Um, but yeah, thank you for watching. If you like the video, press like. If you subscribe the video, hit subscribe. Also, if you have your own little fun facts about Spider-Man that you didn't see on the list, either on this tier or if you read further down and saw that it wasn't there, feel free to put it down in the comments. I would love to include some information that isn't on the iceberg as well. And also, I just love learning about Spider-Man. Oh, also, if you're a fan of Spider-Man and you know about any content that's like closely related to or like reminiscent of Spider-Man, or like any of like anything that gives off the vibes of like the Basic Spider-Man or Spectacular Spider-Man, or even like MCU Spider-Man, like feel free to send those recommendations down in the comments, because I'm always eager to watch more things. Pardon me. And if you don't have any recommendations, or if you don't have any obscure trivia about Spider-Man, that's more than fine. You're more than welcome here. And if you still want to go down in the comments and write something, feel free to spread some positivity. Because yeah, you all deserve it. We all deserve happiness. We all deserve safety. We all deserve rest. And we shouldn't have to earn any of it. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay hydrated, be the happiness or positivity you want to see in the world, and I had one more thing to say. Wait, hold on. Still have a good day, but let me have a second to think. Oh yeah, I'm proud of you. Whatever it is you're doing it well, and you're doing the best you can, and that's more than enough. Have a good day, and hope to see you in the next video. Bye. I have stopped the recording, and now I'm gonna stop the audio. Goodbye.